Do you have problems in your life that you're not addressing that you could solve? And the answer is yes. And it's an easy thing to figure out. You sit on your bed one morning and say, okay, there's some things that need to be done that I don't want to do, that I could do, that would make things better by the end of the day. What are they? Well, your conscience will deliver those suckers in no time flat, man. And then you might have to say, okay, well, how do I entice myself into doing a few of those? And if you ask, instead of trying to force yourself to do it like you're a tyrant and a slave at the same time, you can usually negotiate with yourself so that you'll start to sort those things out. Sort them out. Put your house in order. And then move out. Move on. And out. Yes. That's a Freudian slip, by the way. Yeah. So it's important because the thing is, you have a practice domain. Right? There are things that are within your grasp that you could fix. Fix them. And you'll learn. You'll learn, because it's harder than it looks. Fix them and you'll learn how to fix things. And then something else will beckon as another problem that you could fix. You know, you all have your problems. What does that mean? Like, there's an infinite number of problems in the world. Some of them happen to be yours. Why is that? I don't know exactly. But you have your problems. Great. Solve them. You know, one of the things I learned as a therapist, every therapist has to learn this, is because one of the things you wonder when you're first starting to be a clinician is how do you not take the catastrophes of your clients home with you? And the answer to that is because it's immoral to. They're not your problems. They're their problems. Like, they're their life. You know, your problems are your life. You don't want to solve someone else's problems for them because you take away the deep meaning that's to be found in having them work through the problems on their own. And then you steal the credit. Well, I can help you with that. It's like, well, yeah, maybe, but I don't help you with the next problem then. So, in any case, you sort out the problems that are right in front of you, and it will make you grow very, very rapidly. And then you'll be able to sort out more complex problems without making them worse. That's why a dragon hoards gold. It's like, what's up with that? Well, it'll eat you, and it will, but it has gold. Well, so what do you do about that? Because it's paradoxical demands. Well, what you want to do is face the dragon and get the damn gold. That's what you want to do. Well, you have to be a paradoxical being even to do that. So, you know, in The Hobbit, for example, when, what's his name? Frodo, right? It's not, or it's Bilbo. It's Bilbo in The Hobbit. You know, he's kind of this little underdeveloped, overprotected Shire dweller, and he's called on a great adventure to go and find the dragon. And he has to become a thief in order to manage it. Well, that's pretty weird, you know. It's like, well, it's because as a good citizen, he's just not enough to conquer a dragon. He has to also become a bad citizen in some sense. He has to incorporate the part of himself that's monstrous, let's say, and develop that and hone it. And that's to say that, well, if you're harmless, you're not virtuous. You're just harmless. You're like a rabbit. A rabbit isn't virtuous. It just can't do anything except get eaten. It's not virtuous. If you're a monster and you don't act monstrously, then you're virtuous. But you also have to be a monster. Well, you see this all the time. Harry Potter's like that too. It's like he's flawed, he's hurt, he's got evil in him. He can talk to snakes, man. He breaks rules all the time. All the time. He's not obedient at all. But, you know, he has a good reason for breaking the rules. And if he couldn't break the rules, him and his little clique of rule-breaking, you know, troublemakers, if they didn't break the rules, they wouldn't attain the highest goal. So it's very peculiar, but it's a very, 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 very common mythological notion. You know, the hero has to be a monster, but a controlled monster. Batman is like that, you know. I mean, it's everywhere. It's the story you always hear. Meaning, we have to be more precise. Well, that's a good question, you know, because one question is, you know, you're kind of implicitly moral insofar as you're socialized. But that's sort of procedural, it's just built into you. This is different, this is also becoming conscious of it. and expanding out your personality into dimensions that it wouldn't normally occupy. So this happens to people all the time. So for example, lots of my clients, my clinical clients, are too agreeable, and they're generally women because women are more agreeable than men, but not always, because I've had agreeable men as clients as well. And what happens is they're resentful and they don't know how to stand up for themselves, and it's because they're very compassionate by nature. And so if you're entering into a negotiation with them, they'll let you win. Well, that's not so good, because you need to win too, especially if you're in an organization of adults where there's a struggle, right? When you have kids, you can let them win, especially infants. You have to let them win, and that's partly why compassion is so necessary. But as a basis for negotiation between adults, it's it's insufficient. You have to be a bit of a monster so that you can say no. And so a lot of what you do in psychotherapy is treat people's anxiety and depression. That's a huge chunk of it. Help them straighten out the way they think. That's a huge chunk of it. But another chunk of it is, well, let's toughen you up. Let's put you in a position where you can bargain. Let's teach you how to assert yourself and stand up for yourself, and that's assertiveness training, and it's a huge chunk of psychotherapy. And you need to learn it. It's because part of how you regulate your interactions with other people is to negotiate. And you cannot negotiate unless you can say no. You can't do it. And it causes conflict to say no, and if you don't like conflict, which is basically the definition of being agreeable, then you can't tolerate the conflict, and so then you can't negotiate on your own behalf, and so then you keep losing, and you're bullied, and it's not good. Then you get resentful, and it's really not good. So you have to develop your inner monster a little bit, and then that makes you a better person, not a worse person. It's weird, but that's just how it is.
Is there a way to find your true passion, or is that just a cliche? Well, it's definitely a cliche, and it's the sort of thing that actually annoys me quite a lot about New Age thinkers, and I would more or less put Joseph Campbell in that category. I think you can find what compels you and what might enable you to live in a high quality manner despite the suffering that's associated with life. I think you can discover that, and I think part of the way you discover that is by watching yourself and learning when it is that you're meaningfully engaged. You have to notice that. It's something that happens to you in some sense rather than something that you do. You have to notice when you're meaningfully engaged. And then you have to work to expand the amount of time that you spend in that state. But I would also say that there are moral requirements that go along with that too, because you might say, well, what if you happen to be the sort of person, for example, who finds torturing small animals meaningfully engaging? It seems like that's the sort of meaningful engagement that you probably don't want to expand. So I would say that if you're going to set up your life so that you maximize your meaningful engagement, there's a number of other things that you have to do at the same time. And one of those is that you have to get very clear about who you are and what you're doing. And so, although this would be grounds for a much longer discussion, I think that one of the things that you have to do if you're going to attempt to maximize meaningful engagement is that you also have to do such things as endeavor to stop deceiving yourself and other people in every way you possibly can. And part of the reason for that is that if you engage in deception of any sort, you pathologize the structure of your being, but you could say you pathologize the structure of your nervous system, and then you can't trust its reports. So if you're going to rely on your nervous system's reports of meaningful engagement to guide your future activities, you better do everything you can to make sure that you're not filling that nervous system with the kind of garbage that's going to make it malfunction and give you false reports. So I think that moving towards meaningful engagement has to be associated with making truth your highest value, because otherwise you can't trust yourself as your own guide. I mean, the Catholics have struggled with this for a long time from a theological perspective, because the Catholic position roughly speaking, is that human beings are so steeped in sin that they can't trust their own instincts in relationship to good and evil, and have to use the church and the priesthood as an intermediary. And you can obviously have an argument about that, and of course Protestants have historically done that, but you got to give the Catholics their due. It's like, people aren't pure by nature and only trammeled in their vision by sociological impediments. They're also corrupt beyond belief individually and have to use society as a source of value. So if you're going to personalize your life in some sense, you better act in a manner that makes you a reliable guide.